All right, we have inadvertently begun the video without the video on, and ta-da, there we are. All right, so grown Black folks talk, a very serious form of advanced vetting. Now, this form of vetting does not require advanced intellectual skills. It does not require you to have a great deal of knowledge of the world. It does not require you to pull criminal records, although you should do all those things. I've done those videos already. This is something more. We talked about the 5 kinds of strength: physical, emotional, moral, intellectual, spiritual. This is more on the intellectual and spiritual end, even though it is not an intellectual exercise. You just have to remember how to do it. So, thinking. Get into the habit of giving people good news about people in your locale and seeing how they react to it. Do it a couple times. If there is a complaining spirit in you when you see this news, you need to vet yourself and get past that. Because it is extremely important that you begin to understand whether the people that you're going to be bringing around you, because remember my last video, I talked about what if the people you need are still in front of you. It is very important that you vet the people in front of you for this. In the last 2 days, I've had some fascinating conversations and looked at some fascinating YouTube content. And I noticed that there's a trend. And this trend has existed for a long time. But in the Black community, and this is not a reference to gender, and I'll get into that in just a moment, the whole, what my parents would call the crabs in the bucket syndrome has mutated into a more violent, despairing variant that is more deadly than before. A Black person cannot make a move, or even a good one, without someone else being all upset and coming up with reasons. I listened to a video today, 10 hours of Black women. They weren't complaining about anyone. They weren't talking about divestment. They weren't talking about the manosphere. They weren't talking about squirreling. They were talking about, it's called the Exodus Summit. And I'll put this in the description, about how they found their way out of the rat race while they were still relatively young women. Most of them are my age or young, around within a decade of me. So they're in their late 30s, early 40s. And they have found a way. And these are beautiful women who are out here glowing, basically have become ageless, because you listen to some of their experiences, you realize some of them may be 50 or maybe even approaching 60, but you can't tell by looking. There's not a huge age gap between women who are older and me. They are glowing, beautiful, rested, well-watered women. They have found their way. It did not require them accessing hundreds of thousands of dollars. It did not require them marrying up. They just found their way to, basically, this is a lot of what they did. They did what they needed to do for 20, 30 years in the American system. They figured out how to make their money stretch. They figured out how to work remotely. They found somewhere else in the world that they could continue to work using these internet streets and be able to live a good quality of life away, and are seeking and pursuing peace. They talked about their shared experiences. There are a lot of common threads. Like I was talking to a friend of mine, talking about what Black women are going through in the workplace. This was very common. And for those of you that need context, remember, we just passed the Crown Act this year, meaning that there are jobs that have been discriminated against Black people with natural hair since the Tignon laws. And those go back hundreds of years to keep Black women from being able to show their hair because other people are jealous of what our hair can do and theirs cannot. We just passed that this year. 1,000 other little microaggressions for 1,000 other reasons go on the way, but then Black women are expected to bring Black girl magic and solve problems that other people cannot solve while not being supported. This was a common thread. They found their way out. Not all of them are outside the United States, some of them are, but all of them found their way out. 10 hours of this. They weren't picking on anybody. They weren't calling anybody dusty. They were not putting down anybody. They were just talking about their experience. It's basically a series of interviews, a virtual summit, a series of interviews with these women who were doing all kinds of fascinating things, and all of them legal. So, and this information would be useful to anyone. The toxicity in some of those comments, though. I was shocked that people went back 27 years to find reasons why people couldn't do something. Now, 27 years ago, the world was a very different place. It was 1995. I was 14. Facebook didn't exist. I don't even think MySpace existed yet. If you had a message board, an email was still relatively new. If you had a 56K dial-up modem, you were at the edge of you were at the edge of the game. CDs were still new then, relatively speaking. There are people on this earth who don't even know what that is now. CDs were still new. Fiber optics were still new. You know, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency didn't exist. The dot-com boom hadn't even happened yet. Bill Clinton was in office and we didn't even know about Monica Lewinsky yet. Joe Biden had just passed his crime bill. We had no idea how much trouble that was going to cause in the years to come. Newt Gingrich had just done the contract with America at this time. We had no idea. So if you look at 27 years back for why Black women can't do anything, and you are a Black woman, see, toxicity is not a question of gender. We've got some bad habits of Black men pointing at Black women for everything that's wrong, and Black women pointing for Black men. But that's not the majority of the community. There's a lot of loud people out here. But when you get to the point that you see people doing what the whole goal is to do, without even having to make reference to the fights that are going on, having achieved peace, and nobody considered. Now, I kind of understand where some of the men were coming from, and I understand where some of the racists were coming from. The idea that Black people at all can escape working in this system and not be enriching the dominant society by doing it is deeply frustrating to racists, because they've always needed us more than we needed them. Read your history. We didn't come here to work because we wanted it, because we needed it. No, the climate would not allow white indentured servants to be able to live long enough to be profitable. Tobacco, rice, sugar, cotton, couldn't do it, couldn't do the work. So we were never here because we needed to be here. We were here because the racists who held us could not make America profitable without us. So that when we check out, that endangers the whole system. I don't want to see that. That's one opportunity. That's one less Black person to get over the top of. And as a Black woman of this color, I said what I meant to say in order to try to live like a god on the earth. That I understand. I can understand a group of men who are used to being centered in Black women's conversations realizing that, oh snap, this is not even the divestment crowd. No, these women are not even thinking about us. They have left the whole system. We're trying to, still frustrated because we can't get to the top of the system. These people are out and living extremely well with no reference to us at all. Not only are we not being centered, we're not present. They're out there living the life we want to live and can't find a way to it without us. These women have they're not even divested. This is not even the conversation. No, they seriously are out there gone from even the whole country. These glowing, beautiful women who are aging beautifully and are talking to these younger women and telling them about it so that they're going to have the knowledge in their 20s are not even accessible. I can understand that. The people I didn't understand were the Black women, who were actually the most numerous and the most negative. The very thing that they would have needed knowledge given to them by other Black women, they were finding ways why that these women couldn't do or shouldn't do what they were already doing and not thinking about them. And the thing about it is, when I tell you that the way that these women who were complaining and the way that these men who were complaining were being ignored and not giving any attention, because this group of people at the Exodus Summit, they're not talking about it, they are about it. They absolutely ignored this. It's just like you came with this energy, you didn't even get any attention. Nobody paid any attention to you. They kept on doing what they were doing. They're not looking backwards. They're not trying to do it. These are people out there who have found ways to stay in exotic places on earth for zero goose eggs money. See this? Well, maybe. See that? Goose eggs. These are women out here living their best life for, the cost of food and drink and occasionally going out, but they have got their living expenses down from $6,000 a month to zero money. You don't even need savings. It's just like, can you figure out how to go online and make $600 a month? They're not thinking about giving attention to people who don't want to learn when the information is right there in front of them. They are on the other side of a vetting process where people like that don't even get their attention anymore. And this is part of what I am wanting to talk with you about today. As you are moving forward in your life, that may not be everybody's journey. But if you do not detoxify from being in war mode, which is where a lot of Black women are right now for good reasons, I understand it. But if you cannot detoxify from this, you will hit a real wall, not the wall that Black men who can't move forward either are talking about, but a wall in which people are not going to have the toxicity. People who are living a much better quality of life. Upper Unicorn did a video today, shout out to Upper the Unicorn, about white men, and I've mentioned this before, who are, no, maybe I haven't mentioned on this channel, white men who are now saying they won't deal with loud, angry, divesting Black women. So that means the hypergamy targets, the divested hypergamy highest value targets are like, no, y'all sound too much like the manosphere. And it is not strategic for me as a white man to be out here talking smack about Black men like that, because we're pretending, right? Culturally, we want to pretend like we're post-racial. We may not be as a culture, but it's not strategic for us right now to agree with that. So no, we're not going to deal with that. No one can handle open toxicity at a certain level. So you have to, if you want to go somewhere in your life above toxicity, you actually have to, number one, make sure that you are not someone who sees what other people are doing and is having a cow, and that you're not hanging around with people that are complaining and finding fault and picking at people. And then you have to learn how to talk in terms of good news and then put out news to people and watch how they react. Because let me tell you something. I'm in a work situation. I can't go into the details, but let's just say that I have now, Monday will make 19 months, watched people making the kind of mistakes that people make when they're forced to do something, but their heart is not in it. And after 19 months, it's not fully done because certain people do not want to see Black folks having control of resources that can really begin to change things in the community. They do not want to see this happen. And although all the laws and all the courts and all the rest are on the side of this actually happening, all the way to the federal level, they do not want to do it. They are not supportive of us. If we could have known this, but we did not know how to ask X number of years ago, these are the kind of people that will slow down everything you're trying to do. And see, that's work, that's associations, that's career. But see, God help you if you get into an intimate relationship with the kind of man who takes everything that someone is doing that he cannot access, that he does not know how to do, and has a problem with it, and is a complainer, because it then becomes this. It becomes this because if you continue with your growth, I talked to a sister today, a younger Black woman, who shared with me how certain people all have been talking behind hands about how she's not going to make it in what she's doing. And I told her, it said, it's not that they didn't think you were going to make it necessarily. It's just that they didn't see how you were going to carry them so they would make it. And since they realize you're not going to carry them, they don't want you to make it either. One of these individuals began to physically intimidate her. And I told her, get out. Because I said, it is a progression. Men see how far they can go. And if you do not get out and you do not stop them early, they will continue until you see it. You see it. And I'm telling you the same thing. Early in your vetting process of anybody you deal with on any kind of level, any kind of people that you think you might want to join, any kind of new friend that you may make, any kind of associations that you may make, and certainly before you enter into any kind of intimate relationship. And then, for those of you who are of the LGBT community, I do not give advice specifically, but it just like any kind of intimate relationship, I don't want you to be beat to death either. You have to know if you will be making common cause and being in the presence of enemies you don't need. Because if people are in the habit of hating on and complaining about the good news that happens in their locale, how do you think they're going to treat you when good things begin happening to you? But they don't see how that directly benefits them. You see it. I changed the graphic for a purpose. It doesn't take a lot of thinking your way through this. It's just something you have to know. You have to be in tune with learning how to rejoice with those who rejoice, as the Bible says. As a Christian, this is absolutely commanded. A lot of church people aren't very good at it, but this is how I know they're either not walking with the Lord or they don't know him, period. Because the Holy Spirit is not going to let you sit out here and just be a hater for no reason. Jealousy and malice and spite are part of the works of the flesh. They don't have anything to do with the ninefold fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, long suffering, gentleness, goodness, patience, faith, meekness, faith, and self-control. Being jealous and spiteful and being a hater and always complaining because someone got something that you don't feel like you can get has nothing to do with that. And I would say most spiritual traditions out there, this is not part of them. So I already know the spirituality is off. You just have to remember to do it. Get comfortable feeling good about what other people are doing. Get comfortable talking about having celebratory conversation and then just listening to the people that you're around. If they cannot celebrate that which is good and you stay in their circle, can never quite get this right. There we go. You're looking at that coming into your plans, your dreams, your accomplishments, and even your person. This is serious, particularly for Black women. We know what the Black femicide stats are. And if you think about the fact that Black men are killing each other 25 times a day, in addition to black men being killed by these same men 4 times a day, then you realize a lot of what's going on is basically people stuck in violent despair. They don't think they can do any better, and they don't want to see anybody else have anything they don't think they can get. A lot of this is envy and jealousy and malice and spite. A young man gets a scholarship and someone shoots both his knees out. I know of one case where someone said, because you were going to leave us. The fact that you had the power to leave. The fact that certain Black women who are talking about the fact that they are leaving are being targeted. Because people in violent despair have given up on life and they don't want to see you get in your life. But this is not, because we talked about racism at the beginning. There are people in this country who are still mad because Lee surrendered 150, by the time you see this, 157 years and 6 days, meaning that they're not going to be able to live their best life at the expense of Black people. And they're still mad to see us getting our lives. They mad because we've had a president, a vice president, and now two Supreme Court justices separated by about what 40, 30 years. But they're mad still to see us moving ahead and they're trying to turn that clock back. They cannot see anything good happen for us and be happy. They're mad because they're 40 being turned into Karens and Kyles and have topped out in life because they're not willing to let go of this American nightmare and not willing to learn from someone else how to live a better life. But then we out here getting it. It's not a question of race or gender. It's people who are in increasingly violent despair. I don't need to rehash the incidents of the week. So, vetting. Learn if people can rejoice over things that are to be rejoiced about. And people do have differences of opinion. Something that you think may be fantastic, you may not have all the information someone else has. And if people give you rational reasons, okay. But if people are always finding even rational reasons for something to always be wrong, this means that you're dealing with someone who, when they're not happy about you, will find highly intellectual reasons to gaslight you. Imagine an evil Deanne. Some of you know me as a moderator from the Thieves and Thought Show. You know how I can get up there and absolutely tie somebody in knots? Imagine my evil twin in your life finding intellectually sound ways to tear down everything you are trying to do. Imagine evil Deanne. These kinds of people exist. There are even people, I knew one. This is a story time that is very hard for me to do because that's all around tragedy. This highly intelligent man had perfected the art of picking himself apart in front of me. So you gotta learn to vet for it. Like I said, that's a hard story to do. But that's tough because that's a real tragedy. What I know now, that never would have gotten that far. I would have cut that off much earlier. What you got to do, which illustrates the point. You see this kind of behavior, nip it in the bud, because the point here is what you want to do is you want to be able, to the best of your ability, to live a life that is quiet and peaceful and full of progress and full of peace and joy as much as it is possible. Now, from a Christian perspective, it is very hard to do this while you are still in your sins and nursing your pet sins. That's going to be really hard. I'm just telling you now, Easter's coming. We're going to have to talk about the point of the cross and the resurrection. We're going to have to do that on this channel. But to the extent that you can remove foolishness from your life, don't invite it back in. Don't let it come in by the back door. Get used to talking good about good news. Get over being a hater if you have that in you. Learn how to rejoice in those who rejoice. And then when you have those conversations, introduce conversations to new people in your life, introduce good things to people in your life, and just sit back and listen. And if every time you do it, all you get is hateration, because what you see people do to other people, because they can't stand to see anybody getting ahead, is exactly what they're going to do to you once they get comfortable. And if they have a circle like, then that whole circle is going to try to tear you down. So what you do is don't walk in, walk right away from any people, circles, and organizations. If that's all there is. If you're in a church and all that church does is complain about what the world is doing, whole bunch of white evangelical ministers, 5 and 10 and 15 years and 20 years and 30 years before Donald Trump ever came into office, if you listened to him, you would have known, because everybody was wrong except them. They were the only saved people because they were properly, traditionally, quote unquote, American, and they were the only people with proper values. Except, of course, now if you look behind them, I was talking about this evening with somebody. Them stories don't match up, but they had their people absolutely convinced that they were just here waiting on the second coming and Jesus was coming just for them. So when they got behind the president who thought the Confederates and Nazis were good people, if you had listened to them carefully for the previous 30 years, you would have already known that they were all leaning that way anyway, because their kind of people are the white is right crowd and only white is right crowd. And for all intents and purposes, that's the kind of crowd that sits by and that's Confederates. Well, it contributes Confederates and sits by and excuses Nazis. Go do your reading about the kind of churches that back that stuff up. So you meet that in other communities too, but you'll also meet it in Black churches. The biggest man who came out against homosexuality, preachers that came out in the previous decade, was a certain gentleman by the name of Mr. Eddie Long, Reverend Eddie Long. But you got to go look at the court document for the five settlement with those five young men and what they alleged that he did to them with his protesting self, but what was happening behind closed doors. If all people are doing it complaining about other people, if all an organization is doing it complaining about other people, run. Run. It's an important vetting tool. Okay, that was grim. By the time you see this video, I'm going to be trying to finish off my morning work and go find something beautiful for us to look at tomorrow. Well, today, by the time you see this video. Y'all have a good day now. Some of you will be at church services. It's Good Friday. I probably will actually not, because we're still dealing with a little COVID bump here, but I will take time for contemplation of what the Lord Jesus accomplished on the cross and contemplate that while I'm out and about, and try to keep a quiet, peaceful weekend as much as I possibly can. And I wish that you will have a quiet, peaceful, thoughtful weekend. And some of you don't know how to deserve it, and you still have a good weekend. And I'll see y'all soon. Enjoy your day. Thank you for listening.